It's a brand new year full of great adventures, new people, and inspiring stories. So let's get started. Today, Cindy and I are going to be talking to Scott, who did an incredible road trip across Mongolia. And we're going to give you some of our tips for taking any road trip stateside, stuff you really need to know. So come on, let's get inspired. Come join us.
So we're here to talk today. We're talking to Scott about his road trip to Mongolia,
yeah,
right?
Epic road trip.
Yes.
Like,
I can't even
crazy.
imagine. Yeah, I have no idea. So it's going to be so exciting to hear his adventures on the road for so many miles across so many countries.
Wow.
Right?
Amazing. I know. Sounds I mean, I love road trips. I'm super excited to hear about this.
Me too. So we were inspired by just road trips, and we thought we'd take a few minutes before we talk to Scott and talk about some tips we have on finding the right pit stops, right? Like where to go, everything from bathroom breaks to food. There's all kinds of tips I think that we've both taken a lot of road trips, right? You do it all the time, right?
Yeah, I love taking road trips. In fact, I'm hoping to do it again soon here. So
Yeah. And I've driven across country countless times from having grown up in Iowa and live in California. I've done that trek a number of times with kids, without kids, alone. And you get really good at figuring out where to stop. And I think let's start with like the most important stop, which is bathroom stop, right?
Oh yeah, you got to take bathroom stops, and you got to almost plan ahead. I know a lot of times I see a travel tip come up. A lot of women mention, like, when you see a bathroom, use a bathroom. And that's and that's kind of true with road trips, because there's, even in the United States, I encounter long stretches where it literally, sometimes the signs tell you no services for X number of miles.
Right.
But sometimes they honestly don't warn you that there's miles and miles. I mean, 30.
And we all know you're looking for a bathroom and you're like, no, like, where is it? Because when you gotta go, 5 miles is a long ways, right?
Right. And
so and 20 miles is much longer, or 100 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
So definitely I think it's Kathy Dunn. We'll give her that. I'm pretty sure she's the one that said, if you see a bathroom, use it. That was her tip. Totally agree with that. Always go to the bathroom. But we've talked before a bit about like where to find some of the cleanest bathrooms, where to find a bathroom you would expect. I always suggest looking at hotels, large hotels. So if you're in a place where there are, it's a touristy area, the Marriott, the Hilton, I mean, the swankiest hotels have the swankiest bathrooms. If you're just walk into the lobby and, ask the bellhop or whoever's standing there, where's the restroom? And they'll typically just point you to their public restroom. That's usually a nice place. So don't be afraid to use those restrooms. I also use those restaurants, those lobbies for other things, but
exactly.
Hotel lobbies are one of my favorite places, and it's usually clean and easy to use. You have a few other tips, right, April?
Oh yeah, exactly. When you're going through oftentimes little small towns, some of those towns don't really have a gas station. There's towns that don't really have even a coffee shop. I mean, because those are places too to look.
Right.
But something that's a little different is public buildings like courthouses and public libraries.
Okay. Oh yeah.
They're required to have a public restroom. So oftentimes in some of the historic small New England towns, look for the courthouse or look for the sign for the public library.
Right.
And then park and literally just walk in. I've literally walked in and asked, like, there's usually someone, a desk, something, if you don't see the sign, like, hey, where's the restroom? And they'll point you back. Sometimes it's down a stairs, sometimes it's back, to the back of the library, but always a library will have a bathroom.
Yes, yes. And those are going to be typically cleaner, well maintained.
Yes.
You'll feel less rushed. I mean, of course, we all, take that pit stop when we stop to get gas, right? You stop to get gas and you
Right.
run in the back and use the restroom. And of course that always happens. But, sometimes I want to freshen up, right? And we're going to head off to dinner and we've been in the car all day and I just want to, reapply lipstick, maybe wipe off my face, brush through my hair. And the bathroom at a gas station is maybe not the place I want to do that. So that these tips of finding the better,
Yeah,
the better
exactly.
restrooms can be a place to do that kind of thing. And also when you're walking, you're not always, in the car, you might stop to wander through the town and, those kinds of places, but the hotels and that kind of thing. And also restaurants. I mean, most restaurants will tell you, if you're in a busy place, they don't want you using the restroom unless you plan to use the
Purchase
restaurant.
something. Right,
Yeah.
right.
But
But
I mean,
oftentimes they'll point you to where a public restroom is.
yes. If they
And
have a problem with that.
occasionally, if they're super nice, I know as a woman, I think we have a little bit of an advantage.
Yes.
You're dressed, even on a road trip, you're usually put together to some degree, unless you've been
Yes.
out camping in the woods for days and days. But I've had literally, we stopped at a restaurant. The place was actually closed, but we knocked on the door because it wasn't clear that it was closed. And the woman came, unlocked the door. This was in Alaska, by the way. And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. We closed the restaurant yesterday. I'm just cleaning up." And we're like, "Oh my gosh, we've been traveling for miles. Do you have a restroom?" And she's like, "Sure, I'll let you ladies come in and use the restroom." And she was super sweet about it. But I just politely asked, and she could have easily said, "Hey, no, go down the road." But she honestly let us in and use the restroom. So
it doesn't hurt to
ask.
ask.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah. And it doesn't hurt to be, spruced up a little. I know on long road trips, you can start to look, and you might be in your sweats and, you don't have the best, sometimes I don't even have my shoes on. And so, button up your jacket and, pull things that, and, they're a little more likely to let you in if they feel like you're just going to go in and use the restroom and move along and not do anything else, because that's I think what they're concerned about. But coffee shops are a good option. There's always good places to find a pit stop besides the gas station. Now the bigger gas stations, and I think we all kind of know that too, like the larger more convenience store like gas stations are typically a little bit better as far as the restroom facilities. And I also find that even the truck stops, like sometimes that's intimidating at night because there's a lot of men there. As a woman, that can be intimidating. But if it's daytime and it's a truck stop, they often have showers and all kinds of things. So you'll have a bigger restroom to work with, and it's usually maintained and well cleaned. So that's often is a better option. So when I go in like off the highway, there's like 4 gas stations. If there's a little mom and pop gas station over there, but I need to use the restroom, I'm more likely to go to the bigger one just because I'll feel like it's a bigger restroom and better maintained. That's not always true. It can be the other way, but
oftentimes, it is a little bit better maintained. I mean, sometimes you're desperate and you have to like try to use the, and that's why carry some handy wipes, carrying some antibacterial,
I even carry on road trips toilet paper because sometimes that pit stop is not have what you need. So having a little bit of that in your purse is helpful. Never want to get stuck somewhere. And you have to use rest stops. And I'm not intimidated by rest stops. Rest stops are usually pretty good. Again, something you don't want to probably do at night. But popping in a rest stop during the day for a pit stop is not a bad thing here in the States to do either. So those are some good options for that. But then let's talk about food, right?
Yes, food. You definitely have to have snacks and foods. I always like to look for, there's the snacks you can get at like you said, the convenience store and that type of thing. I always try to find a grocery store at the beginning of the road trip and pack things, go to the sandwich counter, pack some things that you can have or nuts or berries, things that you can eat right there while you're driving, or find a place to pull over. I know we've talked about doing picnics too.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Well, and also looking for like the non-chain restaurants. So it's harder to find those along the highway, because you're going to find the typical fast food places and the typical chain restaurants just right off the highway. But if you need to take a break, you want to take dinner, so we might pull off and grab gas and fill up. But while I'm doing that, I might pull up Yelp. And I've done this a couple of times with pretty good success, and just said, like, what's near me? And, it's a mile or two down the road into a little village or a little town that I'm not familiar with. And they have the best breakfast or the best dinner and best fried chicken. And it's worth a little bit further drive to have a different experience, especially if you have the time on your road trip to like sit down and go in and experience that. So I would always avoid the chains if I can, and try.
Oh, definitely. No, I always try to avoid the chains. And Google Maps now does that too. Like if you pull up Google Maps, and sometimes you're planning for, you need a road stop, and you need to eat, and you need to get out and stretch your legs.
Yes,
I'll start looking at what little town is coming up, and same thing, I'll go down to their main business district,
right?
Take a quick look at the reviews, and usually there's a couple of choices there right within walking distance, which is really nice.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, on the last couple of road trips I've done, somebody gave us a tip about restaurants that use the name of a person.
Yes,
and
that's right.
I can't remember who that was.
It was Mark. I think his name was Mark. It was the New Orleans couple that we talked to a few months ago. Mm-hmm.
And it's true. I was in a little town in Wyoming, and there was like a choice of a place called, like, I think it was actually called Jeffrey's. And there was another place that just said cafe or something, maybe it had just was like the name of the town, cafe or something. And I'm like, you know what, that one
Jeffrey's.
Over there, I'm gonna try Jeffrey's. He put his name on it. Somebody put their name on it, and sure enough, they had like vegetarian options, they had like plant-based, they had all kinds of like different local things and more healthy choices too, not just your typical small town, as we know in the United States, diner foods, which can often be really fried, or maybe not, maybe you're craving a salad, you've been traveling for a few days and need some more fresh choices.
Right. And when we heard that tip from, I think his name was Mark, and I apologize if I got your name wrong, but I think that was who it was. I was remembering I took the train up the Hudson Valley along the river in New York, and I got off, honestly, just got off on the wrong stop.
Oh, okay.
But I was early heading to visit a friend. And so I thought, while I'm here in this little town, I'm just going to go grab food. Because when I got off on the stop, there was like a little, riverside, village right there. So I just walked across the street, and I was like, there's a handful of restaurants. And I thought I'm just going to get something to eat, kind of kill some time so I don't arrive at her house too early.
Oh, yeah.
And so I popped in this place called Antonio's. And I had no idea what kind of food it was. I had no idea, but it was a family-owned restaurant. The food was fantastic. It turned out obviously to be Italian food, but it was all homemade. And I talked to the woman who was serving me, who turned out to be the chef's wife. It was just literally a mom and pop shop there going on. They had opened a few months before I had arrived, and they were so happy to have somebody in the middle of the day, because it was more like a dinner type of place. So I got a really special treatment, some of the best food, took some pictures with her, and I was just honored to be, awesome. In this place. But it was haphazard. But when he mentioned that, you pick a place that has a name in it, because if they put their name on it, I think his theory is that then they're more likely to have better food.
Right. I think it's true.
I think it's true. And so that was really, really good advice. And then I want to talk about this diner. Is it a diner? It's like a burger place that my mom and my Aunt Barb found. I do not know the name of it. I'm going to have to find it. We were taking a train to Chicago, and we were in this little town. We had gotten in the car to drive home. I want to say we were in Mount Vernon, Iowa.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I think that's where we were. And it was late. It was not like midnight or anything, but it was late, past 8 o'clock probably. So in those towns, right, it's sleepy, and most things roll up the carpet at 7 p.m.
Right, exactly.
So we were driving kind of in circles, and I was on my phone trying to find a place. We just needed a sandwich. We wanted something to eat. And we all are in that no chain restaurant kind of thing. We're out of town. Let's be adventurous. And so we found this place that had really good reviews. It was a burger place. And so we turned around the corner and we pulled up, and it was a shack. Like,
oh my.
it was like, there was it would be like if you sat at the bar and behind the bar, they're, frying the burgers.
Right.
And that's all there was inside this restaurant. There was just like stools along the row of this bar, and they're making burgers on the other side. And there's no other tables. There's nothing else. It's probably being held up with, bubble gum and
yeah, exactly.
and tape and duct tape. So we paused, we parked in the parking lot, and we all just looked at each other like, do we do this? It's late.
What do you think?
Looks like there's one guy in there on the corner,
right. Yeah, you're scoping it out.
And there's 3 women in the car, and we thought, well, we're hungry, so let's go. We went in there, and again, mom and pop, it was a couple, a husband and wife team who did this. They were the best burgers. It was fantastic. We had a lovely chat with them, and we just laughed when we got back in the car about how we were so not sure to go in because it didn't look, swanky at all from the outside.
Yeah, no, there's those kind of places on Route 66 on all the little back roads. And sometimes you pull up and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. But those are the best stories, and they're the best food. And I think that's one of the greatest things about road trips and travel in general is just that adventurism, right? Like being able to walk in and go, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to step inside and see what happens.
And sometimes you can't always see from the street what the place is all about. I've been in these little towns, even on road trips with my dad, and sometimes it's like, well, the reviews are good, and you can't really tell from the door or the window. So we'll open the door kind of cautiously and be like, well, we'll just pop in. We can always leave. You're not committed yet. And then it's like the place is packed. You can tell there's a lot of locals, and you're like, all right, give me the menu. Let's sit down and do this.
Yeah. And, there's good and bad stories. I mean, I can't think of any bad ones right now because I just have my head full of things. But, you walk in and sometimes you're not as pleased, or this isn't what you expected. But, it's part of the adventure. And so I absolutely encourage people to like get off the beaten path just a bit. And
drive that extra couple miles from the interstate interchange. Honestly, all the interchanges are meant to get you from one place to another quickly. But if you literally just look for Main Street and go down to the old business district, a lot of them are really trying to revitalize. There's some unique new places popping up, and look where you see cars parked, and generally there's a little restaurant there, or even I've recently in Wyoming, there's like a little coffee shop, but connected to it next door is a microbrewery, and they make their own pizzas, and you can see the pizza oven right there, and then they've got salads, and it's amazing. So you got to just take that little extra time, and you need to get out of the car anyways. That's
and ask a local. I know we've said this before, but those people that work at those gas stations and those little places right off the highway, those people probably live in the neighborhood, right? Because they come to work here every day. They probably have a sandwich down the street. So just ask them, like, say, I want to get out of this area. What, where do you eat lunch? Or, if you were taking your mom out to dinner or out for lunch, like, where would you go? And, they'll give you some like, oh, there's a place about 10 miles down the road, it's on the way, it's like, oh, that sounds perfect, and you would never have known. So there a lot of times, especially if they're not super busy in those restaurants and gas stations and so forth, they'll chit chat with you a bit about where to go. And sometimes you'll even I've had where I ask that question, then I get a whole crowd of people around me like, oh, you want to know the locals?
I did,
Then I'm making notes, and I didn't know I needed to know all these places. Now too many to choose from. But it's really, that actually was what makes it fun. So for sure, road trips are so much fun, both taking the adventure to find the right pit stops.
Exactly.
So, well, I think we're ready to go talk to Scott. Let's see how his trip went.
Yeah,
see if he
let's
had
hear
any
about his.
stops.
Yeah, exactly. Any challenges?
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Okay. Today we are talking with Scott, who wishes he was from Berlin and hates capers. He once worked unloading ring dings, devil dogs, and funny bones at the Drake's Cakes warehouse. And he's also driven after dark along the Afghan border on the Pamir Highway. Scott has a collection of foreign currency from over 60 different countries. And today he's sharing about this amazing road trip from the UK to Mongolia. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you. That's the most interesting introduction that anyone's ever given me, but thank you.
We love this. We learn so many interesting things when we do those introductions. Welcome, Scott. So we're going to start our famous 7-minute timer. And so we're just going to start and tell us, how did you find out, or what started this crazy idea to drive from the UK to Mongolia?
So my brother and I got in the habit a bunch of years ago of taking a big trip every year because we didn't have a lot of family left in the area, and we figured rather than just sit home and make Christmas dinner for ourselves, we might as well go somewhere interesting, preferably somewhere warmer. So one year we went to Thailand and Cambodia. We went to Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands. And then another year we were in Cuba. This was in, I want to say 2015. And so we were in a tour group, and we don't usually do tours, but Cuba, we figured just logistically it would be a little easier to go on a tour. And so we had some issues with our tour group. Our tour guide kind of got drunk and abandoned our group one evening. And so all of us in the tour group kind of bonded, and we kept in touch after the tour, had a Facebook group we created. And one of the people on the group was this woman, Rosie, and her husband, Alan. She's British, but they now both live in Australia. And so we became good friends. She's, older than my brother and me, but very adventurous, is very well traveled. And she reached out to us a number of months later and said, hey, I'm planning on going on this big crazy trip with my best friend, Jane, as part of this charity, fundraising event called the Mongol Rally. And we're planning on driving from the UK to Mongolia. And would you and your brother like to join us? And it sounded like an amazing idea. I'm also a journalist, and I've worked in public radio for many years. And I thought this would be a great thing to document as a podcast. And so we were pretty quickly on board with the idea, and then, began all the many months of planning that you have to do for a trip of this sort. The trip itself took us about 7 weeks, driving through 18 countries, all through Central Asia, places that most Westerners never go to, and just all the logistics of, buying a car to take on a journey, planning the route, getting all the visas and vaccinations, and just an enormous amount of planning that goes into a trip like this, and then actually doing the trip itself. And then they flew home, and then I actually decided I wanted to keep going on more adventures, keep gathering more material for my podcast. So I actually decided to drive all the way back another 7,000 miles. So it was 18,000 miles round trip for me. So lots of crazy stories along the way, and getting to see large chunks of the world that most people never get to see. So I feel very lucky.
Wow. Was there a time you didn't think you were going to complete the journey when you started it?
I mean, at the beginning, we were kind of, very naive and optimistic of it, but along the way, we definitely had many challenges, particularly car trouble, where in many occasions, we seriously questioned, okay, are we just going to have to, fly home and end here? Are we going to make it the rest of the way? So it's this event, it's run by this British group called the Adventurists, and they have very few rules, but one of the rules of the event is you need to take a little tiny car that's kind of unsuitable for the journey. They actually limit the size of the engine. The thinking is that if you take a little tiny crappy car, that there's less of a chance that it's going to make it all the way. You're inevitably going to break down. You're going to be forced to interact with the locals. So you're not just zooming through these places. You kind of have more adventures that way, which is all well and good in theory. But, if you break down 2 or 3 times, that's one thing. But by the 7th or 8th time, it gets to be real old, real quick. And some people are just luckier than us. Our friends, Jane and Rosie, their car was great. They hardly had any trouble at all. But my brother and me, we had so much trouble with our car. It was a little tiny, it was a Nissan Micra, which, if you don't know, it's a little tiny hatchback vehicle. We bought it in the UK, so of course the steering wheel's on the right, so that's a challenge. This was we had trial by fire learning to drive stick for the first time, and then just all kinds of trouble, from radiator issues, overheating in the middle of the desert in Iran, to breaking our rear axle twice in Mongolia. We got it welded, and a few days later it broke again just beyond the weld. The car has like very little horsepower, so it's not good going up steep hills, and there were a lot of mountains along the way, so that was a challenge. And then the big thing was we ended up blowing our head gasket, which if people don't know, that's like a major repair. They have to take apart the whole engine to get to it at the bottom, just the labor of, getting to it. So we blew our head gasket in Turkmenistan. We only had a 5-day transit visa, and they refused to extend our visa. So we have to stick it on the back of a flatbed tow truck and get it towed 6 hours to the border of Uzbekistan, and then wait a week for a new head gasket to get shipped from Dubai. So lots of challenges along the way where we didn't think we would make it.
That was a loaded question, April. We didn't realize.
I know. It's like, I think I would have turned around at any one of those junctures.
Oh yeah, and I didn't even get to Mongolia. I mean, we got stranded one day in the absolute middle of nowhere at the bottom of this like rocky canyon, and neither one of our cars could make it up the other side. It was just too steep. We couldn't turn back the way we came. No one around. I mean, Mongolia has the lowest population density of any country in the world. And thankfully, we had these devices where we could send a text by satellite to the U.S. Embassy, who had to dispatch a team from the Mongolian National Emergency Management Agency to come rescue us and tow us out. And that's a whole kind of ordeal. I tell the whole thing on my podcast if people were interested. But yeah, just crazy experiences that we had no idea what we were getting into at the beginning. And it left us with tons of great stories to tell.
So I was going to ask what was the craziest thing that happened, but I'm not even going to ask the question.
That was it. That was it. Yeah.
It's just like
having the embassy bail you out in the middle of the day. I think that.
Yeah, we were the first. Apparently, we were the first American drivers that the Mongolian National Emergency Management Agency had ever rescued. So a few months after we returned home, the embassy actually sent us a photo of the American ambassador to Mongolia, presenting a certificate of appreciation to the head of the Mongolian National Emergency Management Agency for rescuing us.
Oh, that's amazing. So you're like
we made history.
Yeah.
We caused an international incident. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, I will ask the other question. Is there a country, because you kind of went through these places that most people don't go through. Is there a country you would have wished to spend more time in, someplace that you had not had to rush from one country to the other by car?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many places like that, but it would have been nice to have spent more time in Turkey, because that was actually the first time I'd ever been to Turkey. And it was just really bad timing, because through no fault of our own, this is in the summer of 2016, and we ended up at the border to enter Turkey 6 days after the attempted coup. And so there was a lot of last minute, trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? Scrambling, like, is it still safe to go? Or, so we still went, but the compromise was we just kind of zoomed through. We skipped over Istanbul and Ankara, and we really didn't get to see very much of the country. We did go to Cappadocia, which is amazing. In the southeastern, it's like these old cave homes that people have lived in for millennia. It's beautiful. But we didn't get to see much else of the country, so I'd love to go back at some point.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
fantastic. Well, our timer went off. I don't know if we want to ask a couple last minute questions, April, because there's just so much, Scott, to hear.
Oh, well, it's like after a trip like this, where to next? I mean, do you have a trip planned for this holiday season then? Or?
No, it's so hard with COVID. I've just been trying to play it safe and haven't done a lot of, I'm just going to Florida to see my grandfather and some relatives, but yeah, I really have not been doing a lot of traveling the last year and a half. Unfortunately, I just took a road trip to Toronto, but that's the first international, if you could even call it that, road, trip I've been on. Yeah, I had a big trip planned that I had to cancel at the last minute because of the pandemic. I hope to reschedule at some point. I was supposed to go to Morocco, and then I was going to cross the border and go to do a story for my podcast on this film in southern Algeria, this film festival in a refugee camp in the middle of the Sahara Desert. So amazing. I very much look forward to whenever that's rescheduled, getting to go to that.
Oh yeah, so we're so excited that you're here, Scott, because it sounds like your podcast is amazing, all these journeys that you take. So we hope our listeners will tune in. That's fantastic. So that's pretty much our 7 minutes. So thanks for sharing your story, Scott. We really appreciate it. And we'll put all the notes of your podcast and everything so people can hear more of this, because this is fantastic, in our show notes. So thanks for sharing.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed listening to us today. We had a great time talking with Scott and talking about road trips, and we're going to continue that theme on our podcast. So hop over there. You can look in the description below and you'll see a link to our podcast. And I hope you guys continue to come back. We will keep talking travel, and as always, travel with us through real stories from real people. Talk to you soon.